Morbius definitely sucks, because he's a vampire. You see what I did there? Yeah, but the movie sucked too. It was a borderline nonsensical film that only had one clear vision of maybe let's set up the Sonyverse. But is it really the disaster everyone is saying it is? I mean, yeah. But that's what I want to discuss today. Is there a good movie somewhere in Morbius? Could things have changed to give it a bit more bite and turn it into a success? Well, that's what I'm here today to discuss. What does a good Morbius movie look like? There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. First things first, I want to talk about the post-credit scenes. I know those happen at the end of the movie, but if I don't talk about them first, then they're going to loom large over this whole video, and I just want to get them out of the way so we can just focus strictly on Morbius. Sound good? Cool. And I actually think it works because the post-credit scenes are indicative of everything that's wrong with Morbius. They're rushed, they don't make sense, and they're too focused on setting up the Sonyverse in a way that just is baffling. Look, I know post-credit scenes are supposed to make you excited for what comes next and to get you to ask a ton of questions. But these post scenes in particular have me asking all these wrong sets of questions, like, why did Adrian Toomes appear in this universe? Why was his first reaction to make a terrible joke about food? Does Vulture no longer care about his wife and daughter? Why is the world's reaction to a prisoner suddenly appearing in jail to be like, and let him out? Where did he get a Vulture suit in this universe if there's no Adrian Toomes? How come he doesn't care about his wife and daughter anymore? I asked that twice. Why does he think Spider-Man is responsible for this? Why is it Morbius's first question, who the heck is Spider-Man? How did Vulture get Morbius's contact number? Why would he want to team up with Morbius? Why did I stick around to the end of the credits to see if there was another one after the credits? And here's the thing, there was a way to make these post-credit scenes make sense. They bent over backwards to have Keaton's Vulture show up and form the foundation of the Sinister Six, but they did so in the literal worst way possible. Hear me out. Wouldn't it have been better if it was this universe's, meaning the Sonyverse's version of Adrian Toomes show up and try to recruit Morbius to his new version of the Sinister Six? That would have been better than trying to maintain a link to the OG MCU? Think about it, the post-credit scenes could have been relatively the same, but Morbius is instead contacted by that universe's Adrian Toomes for a job. That way you can establish a different Toomes than the one we saw in Spider-Man Homecoming, and therefore keeping the character arc intact for the Homecoming version of Toomes. That way you can establish a version of Toomes that isn't connected with his family, or doesn't have a huge, weird vendetta against Spider-Man. And it would also provide a valid explanation for how he has a suit in that universe. Also, the whole point of the multiverse is to show that there are other versions of characters out there, so why in the heck did the Morbius movie double down and say this version of Toomes is the only one we want to mess with? I know the trailers revealed that originally Toomes was already there, and after No Way Home they had to do some major reshoots to fix everything, but it's one of the worst post-credit scenes that I've seen in a superhero film, and it really didn't have to be. Alright, that's the post-credit sequence, but man, now I still have the whole rest of the movie to talk about. Okay, so now let's get into the actual Morbius movie to see where it went wrong and how it could have been fixed. And basically everything starts with its central character, Morbius, the living vampire. Morbius is an overall tragic figure in the comics. He's an intelligent, haunted individual who constantly balances his search to cure himself with his overwhelming need to gobble up human blood. He's a character constantly at war with himself, and that's what makes him so sympathetic to all the comic readers. That, and he's just, really cool sometimes. But the Morbius we got in the movie is none of those things. We've all heard the stories of how committed Jared Leto is to this role in particular, but that's baffling since Dr. Michael Morbius remains a boring character throughout the entire film. There is nothing interesting about him. His obsession with finding a cure for his disease at the beginning of the movie has as much enthusiasm as I do when I'm ordering lunch off a menu somewhere. And what's even worse is that after he becomes a vampire, his reaction is just like, oh, that's cool. Are you kidding me? And there's no real representation of how he's struggling to control his bloodlust either. Because of the editing of the film, he really has no time to process the changes that he's going through and the dramatic transformation that just happened to him, and instead has to shift focus almost immediately to stopping Milo, which makes it so that he's just a boring character from start to finish. In fact, it looks like they cut out parts of the movie that would have made him more charismatic. I know we all saw the trailer like 50,000 times times as we waited for this movie to release, so I know you know what I'm talking about when I say there was a part in the movie where he goes, "I am Venom." No, just kidding, I'm Dr. Michael Morbius at your service. The movie cuts that last part out, so he just says, "I am Venom." And that makes so little sense in context, and it's a bad joke, sure, but at least that would have been the movie's attempt to give him a bit more of a personality. If they cut that line from the movie, what other lines did they cut? All I'm saying is the movie should have had a central character that was actually struggling with his vampirism in a charismatic way that made him likable to watch. The emotional through line would have been a bit better if we saw him afraid of his powers, but also sort of maybe tempted by them. But nope, instead we got Dr. Michael Morbius. And here's the thing, everything I just mentioned about having a central character be conflicted about his newfound vampire powers, but also sort of happy because they're no longer sick and diseased, and somehow finding a striking balance between tortured and charismatic at the same time, yeah, the movie had that in its villain. Matt Smith's Lucian, or Milo, what should I call him? Anyways, Matt Smith's character was literally all of those things, and there's a part of me that wishes Matt Smith played Morbius instead. Yeah, imagine for a second if Matt Smith and Jared Leto switched roles in the movie. Let Smith be the tragic, obsessed, charismatic, sometimes terrifying version of Morbius, and then have Jared Leto be the weird, reclusive billionaire who breaks bad. I think you have a much better movie if that's the case. And another thing, his name is Lucian. Don't you hate it when you go to the hospital as a young kid and the weird child next to you suddenly says, "Hey, your name is Milo now because there's been a bunch of Milos here," and then that sort of sticks with you your entire life to the point where even the doctors are calling you Milo? What gives? That's just crazy. Okay, you watching this video right now, your new name is Charlie. Sorry, Charlie, that's what happens now. Charlie, I hope you're okay with that. Better change your license and passport, Charlie, because you're stuck with that name forever now. See, it's ridiculous. But let's talk about Matt Smith's villain overall. While the performance was one of the only redeeming things about the movie, it was sort of weird how much they seemed to change it up. Originally, it was reported that Smith was playing Lakshis Crown, who goes on to become the supervillain known as Hunger in the comics. Hunger is like a pseudo-vampire and has a very fascinating backstory, and I wonder if the Morbius movie would have been more faithful to that if we would have gotten something a little bit better in the end product. That I'm actually not so sure about, so I'll move on, but I still stand by the fact that Matt Smith and Jared Leto should have switched roles. Alright, this section is all about a certain way to make the Morbius movie better, but I gotta start off by saying I know this one is a total fantasy, but please bear with me just for a few minutes and I'm sure you'll think it's fun too. They never would have done this, but I sort of wish Morbius would have fought Spider-Man in this movie. Here's my pitch. Since this movie got delayed for almost 2 years and then was forced to come out after No Way Home, which introduced the multiverse, then I basically wish they would have scrapped everything and just kind of started over. I know that literally would never happen because, money, but I would prefer that they strip a project down and rebuild from the start rather than put out a product that specifically is going to tank the rest of the Sonyverse going forward. Because overall, this movie needed to be a success. The Sonyverse is still trying to be a thing, and it doesn't work if the movies are poorly received. So here's my far out pitch. After No Way Home, Andrew Garfield is sent back to not his universe, but rather the Sonyverse to be that Spider-Man there. On a character level, it sort of works. He talked in No Way Home about going down a dark path and being lost ever since the loss of Gwen, so maybe a change of universes would be good for him. Anyways, he's in the Sonyverse now, right? Okay, good, got it. And with that foundation, then you just have a Morbius movie where Spider-Man is the antagonist. Center the whole thing around Morbius's transformation and search for the cure, but also have Andrew Garfield's Spidey show up to try to stop him. That accomplishes a few things here. Remember how I said that Smith's Milo character basically had more character development than Morbius? Well, you could give all those character beats to Morbius in this situation, which would make him a more fleshed out character because you wouldn't need to split your time between two different vampires. Plus, then this would have been a Spider-Man movie like we've never seen before. A Spider-Man film completely from the villain's perspective. It would force us to care about Morbius and his search for the cure while also seeing Spider-Man as just this distant, masked, quippy vigilante who's constantly following Morbius around trying to stop him. Then all of a sudden, this movie goes from one of the worst Marvel movies ever to one of the most interesting. But I know that's still something that could probably never happen, so let's get back to what we were given. This video is all about what Morbius should have looked like, and honestly, this would have been better if we spent more time on the supporting cast. Out of all the side characters, the one who probably makes the best impression is the Dr. Martine Bancroft character. Hey, I like that last name. I wonder why. Dr. Bancroft is the shoehorned love interest of the film and tries to help Morbius out because she, I don't know, loves him, maybe? Who knows? Yeah, if I was remaking this movie, I probably would have kept them as colleagues with a romantic tension for this film and explored a true relationship later on. You know, it was really awkward pacing for them to include that scene of Morbius and Dr. Bancroft kissing on the rooftop. It felt like that was only there to shove down the audience's throat like, see, these two characters love each other, so now feel bad when Milo kidnaps her. But like, we knew how much these characters meant to each other without them awkwardly kissing on a rooftop. Anyways, although I liked her character in the film, if I was remaking this, I probably would have made it a bit more clear what happened to her at the end. She was bitten by both Milo and Morbius, and she also ingested some of Morbius's blood, so like, one of these things caused her to wake up and be a vampire at the end, which, I mean, sure, okay, at least she's not gone. Again, I don't have a huge problem with this character as is, but it's the other supporting characters that drive me batty. The hardcore monster hunting FBI agent with a really cool bionic arm that he can use to blast bad guys away. Oh wait, no, strike that. Tyrese Gibson is nothing like this. This is the weirdest thing in the movie. We've heard reports that at one point this movie had Strode as someone with a bionic arm that he would use against bad guys and shoot like, I don't know, lasers or something. But all of that is cut out of the movie. But here's the thing, why cut that out of the movie? That is an interesting character beat and populates this world with interesting characters. Like what, were they afraid of making this movie too much fun? Simon in the comics is a legit cool character who hunts monsters like Morbius, and the movie decided just to cut down his part. In fact, you could cut him out of the movie completely and nothing changes. Oh, and the less said about the treatment of the fantastic Jared Harris, the better. The dude is such a good actor that he looks exactly the same over the course of 25 years from Morbius's flashback to the present. Yeah, the movie should have given all the supporting cast more to do. So this is a video all about what Morbius should have been like, and you know what? I'm sorry, but I do think this should have been R-rated. I get that PG-13 is the sweet spot for a lot of superhero blockbusters, and because the Venom franchise were PG-13 and made like a bunch of money, that all Sonyverse movies going forward are going to be PG-13, but if any of these characters deserved an R rating, it's probably Morbius the Living Vampire. An R rating would have allowed the movie to shake off the PG-13 limitations and actually have a vampire movie with a terrifying vampire at its center. Morbius in the movie never really got a chance to explore the true darkness within. I remember back in the days of the old Spider-Man animated TV show where Morbius didn't hunt for blood, but he hunted for plasma because they couldn't say the word blood on TV, and instead of fangs where he sucked blood out, he had weird, like, I don't know, sucker things on his hand. All I'm saying is we're past that point for Morbius, and Morbius deserves a chance to be a little dark and gritty. In fact, let all these Sonyverse characters have a bit more edge to them, and you would maybe probably have better movies. What do you guys think? Do you think Morbius would have worked better as an R-rated movie, or do you think PG-13 was an okay framework to work off of? While sitting through all of Morbius's like 8-hour runtime, I found myself sitting there thinking about what other Morbius stories the movie should have adapted instead. I mean, I couldn't help it. I'm staring at this bland adaptation and rolling my eyes so hard that I could see my brain that I couldn't think about anything else. First and foremost, my mind went straight to a Midnight Suns story. Midnight Suns are a group of supernatural heroes who get together and do spooky things. Now, I do think the MCU is building their own Midnight Suns team, but while watching Milo dance around his apartment, I couldn't help but think of the time when Morbius got together a team of heroes like Man-Thing and Werewolf by Night in order to stop a zombie apocalypse. Now that's a movie I want to see. Yes, it would have been a little ambitious for a first movie in a franchise, but at this point, why not? It would have been better than what we got. But I know these big team-ups are, big and expensive to pull off and take a lot of time, so what individual Morbius stories could the movie have pulled off instead? It might have been cool to see an adaptation of Ultimate Morbius, which is a version of the character that hunts down other vampires. Overall, any story that sees Morbius searching for a cure would have been better than seeing Morbius becoming a vampire. Because look, I get it. This this is an origin story. It would have been weird to not see how Morbius became a vampire, but I think the most interesting part of Morbius's character is his search for a cure. He's constantly looking for a way to stop the disease within him, but along the way often finds himself helping out a ton of other people. That's a tragic aspect to the character, and I think the whole movie could have just started with Morbius as a vampire looking for a cure rather than seeing him turn for the first time. So now the big question is, actually, where does Morbius go from here? The first movie is making a good chunk of change, but the consensus seems to be that it's a major disappointment, and I'm one of those who think that. If you were Sony, would you continue on with a Morbius sequel that sees Vulture and Morbius team up with people like Venom, Kraven, and Madam Web to, I don't know what they would do together, fight a different bad guy? Fight Null! Throw Null in there, sure, why not? I mean, really, the Sonyverse is in such a strange position right now. I guess they have to see how their Kraven and Madam Web movies do before they decide to make any more moves with any certain characters. But can you imagine if Kraven and Madam Web were as boring as Morbius was? I mean, that would be the final stake through the heart in the Sonyverse, that's what I think. And overall, a major course correction is necessary. And if I was making decisions, I would probably just cut Morbius out of everything and, just like never mention him again. I'd just have a Venom 3 movie that has like a Daily Bugle headline somewhere that like, the Morbius vampire eats a ton of garlic and is now gone forever. Whoops, problem solved. A part of me hoped that Wesley Snipes' blade would have just showed up randomly and sliced Morbius' head off. Wouldn't that have been crazy? That would have been the ultimate crossover and probably would have turned this movie from bad to the best thing of all time. But what do you think? What could have made Morbius better? Let me know.